Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Director of the UVA Karsh Institute of Democracy and W.L. Lyons Brown Family Director for Policy and Public Engagement for the Democracy Initiative, Melody Barnes.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It is so wonderful to see you all. Welcome to UVA and to Carr's Hill. My colleague, Laurent Dubois, and I are so grateful, first of all, that Jim and Katie Ryan allowed us to use their backyard. So first of all, thank you for that. And we're also thrilled to have all of you here. We know that your schedules are busy, that calendars are packed, and that you took time to come here and learn more about UVA's One Small Step project, and our launch is gratifying to us. So thank you for doing that. I also want to thank Ian Baucom, who's the Dean of the College in Arts and Sciences, who's there in the back, for his continuing leadership and support. He had the foresight several years ago to envision the Democracy Initiative and has supported our work ever since. So thank you so much, Ian. I suspect that most of you are familiar with StoryCorps. I know I've heard several people say, I am a huge fan of StoryCorps. And you know that it is the groundbreaking national effort to bring individuals together through the power of storytelling, or I would say, truth-telling. For over 15 years, often via National Public Radio, we've been able to listen to moments people shared with those they love, those they like, and some that they'd never met before. Some conversations have been sentimental, and some have been joyful, some have been heartbreaking, and some have been hilarious. I still remember sitting in a darkened auditorium and hearing StoryCorps creator Dave Isay share a conversation between a mother and the young man who had killed her son. And some way, somehow, they had not only built a relationship, but they expressed love for one another. The conversation reduced all of us in that auditorium to tears. And I don't mean that pretty, gentle crying where the tear just trickles down your face. I mean sobbing. We were digging tissue out of our purses and sharing it with one another. We were all so moved by this conversation. My husband arrived a few minutes late, and he just looked. He hadn't heard the conversation. He just looked at us and said, "What is going on in here?" And that's what sits at the heart of StoryCorps. The mission to preserve and share humanity's stories in order to build connections between people and create a more just and compassionate world. Personally, I think that sounds like something we all need a little more of right now. As I mentioned, the person who came up with this concept is Dave Isay, who we're lucky to have with us today. I'm not going to go too deeply into what inspired Dave, as I hope he'll share that with all of us in a moment. But I will tell you that he started StoryCorps as an experiment in Grand Central Terminal. I mean, who would have thought about doing that? And it's grown into a national phenomenon that has created a TED Prize, a MacArthur Genius Fellowship, and several Peabody Awards. Not only that, but the StoryCorps sessions are archived at the U.S. Library of Congress. Dave has expanded the mission with deep dives into lives of military families, refugees, and the LGBTQ community. And not to sit still, and you'll get a sense of that in just a few moments, in 2018, Dave felt strongly that this interview technique might be a way to address the growing political divide in our country. With a few test cities, he developed a new effort, One Small Step. And that's where we come into the picture here in Charlottesville. After hearing about this work, Laurent and I connected with Dave, and with the support of President Ryan and Dean Baucom, we decided to invest in a year-long project to bring together students and faculty and staff, and as importantly, residents from Charlottesville and Albemarle County, to see if we can make an important step to listening and hearing across our differences. We know that even within the bounds of basic norms, there's frustration and anger and disappointment. Some wonder how to engage or even whether to engage. But we've also heard a strong desire to have these tough conversations, and we believe that they're necessary alongside all the other work that we do in the Democracy Initiative, our films and podcasts, the curriculum, and the creation of new courses and public policy engagement. So now I want to turn this conversation over to individuals who can explain it and illustrate it better than I. First, Jim Ryan and Dave Isay will discuss the program and the potential in our hometown of Charlottesville. And following that, we're going to hear from two UVA students who have already recorded the very first UVA Charlottesville One Small Step interview. But before we ask Jim and Dave to come to the stage, I want you to take a look at this video.
I wanted to be here today because I was hoping that I could find out from someone who maybe is different from me how you got to be that way.
I wanted an opportunity to actually sit down with somebody that was reasonable, had an open mind.
It's important that we start to see each other as human again.
You're a hardworking single father that wants what's best for his children. That's common between you and I.
It really made me stop and think about what I can do to help us become a united states instead of a divided states.
It's actually kind of refreshing to sit down and actually have a conversation.
Is there one thing that you respect about the way that I see the world?
No. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We agree on many things.
I know. We're more likely to get along than not get along.
So we have agreement.
I'm so glad that we got to meet.
I am too.
It's just great to know you a lot better, where you're coming from, and I think it's been a wonderful experience.
I do too.
I live in the red house on the corner. Please come by and see me.
And now, please welcome to the stage University of Virginia President Jim Ryan and StoryCorps founder and president Dave Isay.
Hi, everybody. Melody, you didn't tell me you saw me speak.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Carr's Hill. Thanks to Melody, Laurent, Ian Balcom, and everyone else connected with the Democracy Initiative for this amazing partnership. Dave, I have to say this is like a bucket list item for me because I'm a huge fan of StoryCorps. So to be able to talk with you about StoryCorps and One Small Step is a total delight. I wonder if we can start with StoryCorps. We heard a little bit about the origins, but tell us a little bit about why you started it, and when you did you expect that it would become the phenomenon that it has?
Sure. Thanks, and thank you so much for having us here. We're so excited to be launching this special project with you all, with UVA, and with Melody, who's just been an angel to us over the last year. So how did StoryCorps start? StoryCorps is about 18 years old. As Melody said, it opened in Grand Central Terminal. Very simple idea. I had been a radio documentary producer for decades before starting StoryCorps, and I did a lot of work in prisons and homeless shelters, and I saw that, you know, when I was a kid in a prison interviewing someone who was serving 45 years on a life without the possibility of parole sentence, that just getting the chance to talk about their lives, their parents, their kids, their dreams for their kids was important and sometimes transformative for them. And I've always been interested in audio as public service, not so much as entertainment, for better or worse. And at some point, I thought maybe there was a way to take radio to the next level of public service. Yeah. So had this idea for StoryCorps, which essentially gives everybody the chance to be listened to. Right. You know, when you make a documentary, usually you're interviewing some people, whether it's TV or radio or print, you're interviewing a small number of people and creating this work of art or education or entertainment that's seen or heard or read by many, many people. And the idea of StoryCorps was, let's give everybody in the country the chance to be listened to. Right. So we put a booth in Grand Central Terminal where you can bring anyone who you want to honor by listening to their story, a parent, grandparent, friend. You go in the booth, you're with a facilitator who works for StoryCorps. Lights are low, sacred space, and you sit across from your grandmother for 40 minutes. And I knew from making radio documentaries that the microphone gives you the license to talk about things you may never have talked about before.
Right. Yeah.
And everybody, from the very beginning thought of it as, if I had 40 minutes left to live, what would I say to this person who means so much to me?
Right.
So you have this everybody cries at StoryCorps.
Yeah, no,
you have this
I
very,
know. Yeah,
very
I've been
intimate
there.
conversation with a loved one. And then at the end of the 40 minutes, you get a copy, and another, as Melody said, stays with us, goes to the Library of Congress. So your great, 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 great grandkids can get to know your grandmother through her voice and
Right.
story. And started out as kind of a crazy idea, and then we started sending these Airstream trailers across the country. And Melody was very nice to say this is all me. We have an incredible team who's helped develop this, facilitators, all sorts of people all around the country. And it's more, the name is, I kind of regret the name because it's much more about listening than about storytelling. It's really about honoring and celebrating one another's lives through listening. When you sit with your grandparent and you say, like, who are you?
Right.
How do you want to be remembered? Who was kindest to you when you were a kid? It's like, you're just telling them how much you love them.
Right.
Right. So now we've had about 750,000 people participate. It's the largest collection of human voices ever gathered. And essentially what we're doing is collecting the wisdom of humanity. So it's a pretty fun, effort, and I think we're just getting started.
And when did NPR start broadcasting some of them? Because that's how I first came across
Yeah.
it. And NPR always talks about driveway moments,
Yeah.
where you stay in your car. And StoryCorps has been my most consistent driveway moment.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my core competency was as a radio producer, right? So that I was a documentary producer before starting StoryCorps. And I thought this is kind of an experiment in human connection. And I thought there was a finite number of conversations that could happen between a grandparent and a grandkid,
Yeah.
and that after a couple months they would start to repeat. So we call that what happens in the booth access to the experience. So the whole thing was built around access to the experience, and I didn't think we'd have stories coming out of the booth. One of the miracles of StoryCorps is that there are all of what everybody talks about are the great themes of human existence. Again,
Yeah.
it's 40 minutes to sum up your life. It's
Yeah.
about who we love. It's about death and our childhood. But the tapestry of stories that come out of it is never ending. So after 2 years, we started broadcasting on NPR, and that's when it really started to get popular. And it's kind of, we think of those, we edit 1/400th of 1% of what we record. If you think about that,
Wow.
the insanity of that, into
Yeah.
these little 3-minute poems
Yeah.
of who we are as human beings, as Americans, And I have a video, if we want to watch.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You can't see, but you can hear.
Okay.
So, and everybody else can see on the screens.
It'll feel familiar.
Yeah.
Am I
So-
going to start crying?
I don't think so.
right.
I don't think so. If you're on the other side, maybe.
Okay.
So this is just a typical, beautiful StoryCorps interview. Again, every StoryCorps interview is 40 minutes long. We edit it down into 3 minutes. This is a father and son in Jackson, Mississippi, in one of our Airstream trailers. Albert Sykes is the dad. The son is named Aiden. I think he's 10, and they're just talking. So let's watch.
Do you remember what was going through your head when you first saw me?
I remember when the doctor pulled you out, the first thing I thought was that he was being too rough with you. And he actually held you like a little Sprite bottle, and he was like, "Here's your baby." That was the most proud moment of my life. Don't tell your brothers, because it's 3 of y'all. But it was like looking at a blank canvas and just imagining what you want the painting to look like at the end, but also knowing you can't control the paint strokes. The fear was just, I got to bring up a black boy in Mississippi, which is a tough place to bring up kids, period. But there are statistics that say black boys born after the year 2002 have a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison. And all 3 of my sons were born after the year 2002.
So, Dad, why do you take me to protest so much?
I think I take you for a bunch of reasons. One is that I want you to see what it looks like when people come together, but also that you understand that it's not just about people that are familiar to you, but it's about everybody. Did you know the work that Martin Luther King was doing was for everybody and it wasn't just for black people?
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah. So that's how you got to think. If you decide that you want to be a cab driver, then you got to be the most impactful cab driver that you can possibly be.
Are you proud of me?
Of course. You my man. I just love everything about you, period.
The thing I love about you never gives up on me. That's one of the things I will always remember about my dad.
You said it like I'm on the way out of here, or like I'm already to go.
So, Dad, what are your dreams for me?
My dream is for you to live out your dreams. It's an old proverb that talks about when children are born, children come out with their fists closed because that's where they keep all their gifts. And as you grow, your hands learn to unfold because you're learning to release your gifts to the world. And so for the rest of your life, I want to see you live with your hands unfolded.
Okay, I'm going to collect myself. So you talk about how the experience of StoryCorps is important for those who are participating, but it's also important for those who are listening, which gets me to One Small Step. In some ways, it's a natural extension. In other ways, it's a pretty different model, right?
Yeah.
You're no longer taking people who know each other. You're bringing people together who may have never met or never had a conversation. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea and what your hopes are for this project.
Yeah, no, I mean, the definition of One Small Step is that the people haven't met. And what we call signature StoryCorps interviews, the 750,000 people who've participated, all know and love each other. They choose to be together. So, and it is, it looks a little bit like StoryCorps, but under the hood, it operates very differently. The idea for this actually is, we started thinking about it 5 or 6 years ago. My colleague Lisa Gale back here and I, and again, you know, we had never put strangers together, and obviously putting strangers across the political divide together is difficult.
Yeah.
And our Hippocratic oath is that we do no harm to people. So we tested and tested and tested and tested for years to come up with this new methodology that puts two people who are strangers together, not to talk about politics, but just to get to know each other as human beings.
Yeah.
And ended up calling it One Small Step because it really is just one small step. But you know, the premise of it, which has proven to be true because we back up everything we do with research, is that it's hard to hate up close.
Yeah.
So it's built on contact theory, which is one of the oldest theories, most studied theories in the history of psychology, not oldest, by a guy named Gordon Allport, who says that under very specific conditions, if you put enemies together for a one-on-one experience and they feel like they have equal footing, and they have a visceral experience with each other, and StoryCorps is a visceral experience. Everybody's aware that, you know, future generations are going to listen to it, that hate can melt away and people can see each other in a new way. If you do it wrong, you can make things much worse, but if you do it right, you can see pretty remarkable changes in people.
Right.
It's kind of a tear in the narrative. And, you know, you have your Institute for, UVA released a study a week and a half ago that talked about, you know, what we're seeing with the divides in the country, toxic polarization. And again, this is not, One Small Step is not about arguing. You know, arguing, disagreeing is fine. It's dehumanization where it gets to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And, you know, the numbers are kind of terrifying that we're seeing, and they're all going in the wrong direction. That
in terms of the political divide.
In terms of the political divide, that we're seeing each other as less than human. Your Institute of Politics came out with a study that said 80% of Biden and Trump voters see the opposing party as a clear and present danger to American democracy.
Yeah.
That was a week and a half ago. And you know, our concern is that a democracy can't survive in a swamp of mutual contempt, and that's where we're moving. So we have decided to try and see, I mean, it's very much of a moonshot, and we're aware of that, but to see if we can convince the country it's our patriotic duty to see the humanity in people with whom we disagree. Through this intervention, through this simple act of sitting with a stranger and asking them about their lives. And you know, it's a moonshot, but I think, you know, and I think this is why you guys joined in with us. You know, we have to take a shot at it because at this moment of uncertainty, the only thing we know for sure is that if this culture of contempt, you know, wins out, we're all going to lose.
Right. And how much do you structure the conversations? Is there a script? Do you say, like, don't talk about X, Y, or Z? Like, if it gets close to talking about guns, ask about the weather, or like, what do you...
So we, like StoryCorps, we're a public service in every way. So when you come in with your grandmother, you're allowed to talk about anything you want to talk about. And the facilitators, whose job it is to bear witness to these interviews, will tell you, ask the question you've always wanted to ask fast, because the 40 minutes goes by really quickly. We also don't tell people what to talk about in a One Small Step interview. We do not. But they know that there are ground rules, so you're not allowed to, shout, cut each other off, argue, and we encourage people not to talk about politics.
Okay.
And the way it works, which is different than a StoryCorps interview, is that you write a bio. We match you based on, you sign up to do this, and we have thousands and thousands and thousands of people who have signed up. You fill out a form that talks about your politics and talks a little bit about your life. And we match you with someone across the divide who's got something in common with you, although you don't know that when you go into the interview. And you also write a bio. So you receive the bio of the person who you're going to talk to, and they receive your bio, first name only, not the last name, so you can't Google them.
Right.
And the interview starts with you reading the bio of your partner back to your partner, and your partner reading your bio to you. And then you have this conversation and choose together what questions you want to ask. It's 50 minutes instead of 40 minutes. I won't get into the weeds on why we extended it by 10 minutes.
Right.
But it's interesting watching. That video was from a couple of years ago. And all of these interviews, all of them end the same way, almost to the point where it's belies belief, with people saying, I want to come see me at my house on the red house on the corner.
Right.
Let's take a walk. Can I have your phone number? And Mr. Rogers used to carry around in his wallet a quote that said, "It's impossible not to love someone whose story you've heard." And that may not quite be true in all cases, but it's true in a lot of cases. So this is just an effort to remind us that if we spent more time listening and less time arguing, we'd be such a stronger country. And again, launching this. I was telling some folks from your staff that this is very different for us. We just launched One Small Step nationally a couple months ago. And this is the first university partnership we've had.
Yeah.
And this is also, our facilitators are very highly trained. And we usually just facilitate everything that we do. And we have such trust with the Institute of the Democracy Initiative and Melody and her team that we're training students and staff and faculty to be the facilitators of these interviews. So over the next year, we're hoping that people across UVA will participate, and that courageous listening will become a mark of what it means to live in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
A town and gown kind of project where students are talking to people who live in town and so forth. So what's your hope for One Small Step?
I thought I was supposed to ask the question.
Huh? No, I'm the question asker.
I think I have the same hope that you do. I mean, I believe in the power of stories, and I believe in the power of conversation. And I think at a university, it's an ideal place to foster conversations across lines of difference. And I share your implicit view that sometimes the most powerful change happens from a one-on-one conversation rather than a large group conversation. And so I see our partnership here as a piece of a number of other things that we're doing, including something we're launching just today called Dialogue Across Grounds, which is small lunches with a group of students who have differing views, who are going to talk about an issue of contemporary interest. And to your point, a lot of it is just breaking down preconceived notions of those who might harbor different views. And it is hitting on things that you might not realize you have in common. So one of the things that we've been doing too, which I love, is a story series called Double Take, where members of our community get up for 5 or 10 minutes, a little bit like the moth, and just tell their story. Yeah. And one of the reasons it's so powerful is because it's not just that you hear the story of the individual, but it gets you thinking that the person next to you has a story, and the person on the other side of you has a story. And this person who you might not have thought you had nothing in common, who you might have thought you had nothing in common with, turns out you have a lot in common with. So But let me turn it back to you. I mean, ultimately,
Very tricky.
I know. I've been doing this a little while, not as long as you. What's your ultimate hope, and where do you see this going? And how many would you like this all across the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of this is social norming. That now it's normal for us. And again, I mean, I can't emphasize enough how I think dangerous what's happening in this country is.
Yeah.
And if you look back to dehumanization is very dangerous. In Nazi Germany, the Germans called Jews Untermenschen, less than human.
Right.
Slavery, Rwanda. I mean, we see what can happen, and political violence is the result of this kind of affective polarization. So we've launched in 4 cities, and we do want this to spread across the country, and we want it. There's a multi-billion-dollar hate industrial complex out there.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Right? How do you break through that?
Well, it's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
again, that's why it's a moonshot. I mean, there's billions and billions and billions of dollars being made by media, people in social media, getting us to hate each other.
Right.
But you got to love a David and Goliath fight, and this is just a fight back, and I think we're better than this, and I don't think we have a choice. We've got to figure out how to reverse this trend, or we're in real trouble. I mean, again, UVA is like the word democracy is just woven into the fabric of UVA, and our democracy is in real trouble if we can't figure this out. So it's 2 interventions. One is this on the ground, one small step, and then we direct people. There are many bridge building organizations that are kind of cropping up across the country, and once you've done one small step, we direct you to another bridge building organization, or you get to know this other person. And it's interesting, I was thinking last night, really it's a little bit what you were talking about. It's a rip in the fabric of our perception of what people who are different, and those little rips in the fabric of our perception can make a big difference when push comes to shove, even years later.
Right.
So we have this very powerful intervention, and then a public health campaign to remind us to listen to one another.
Right.
And we're hoping that those 2 things combined can make a little dent and start us moving in the other direction. And we're just keeping our fingers crossed and finding great partners like UVA to move it forward.
Right. And do you follow up with people who have participated to see whether they stay in touch or whether they go on to these other bridge
Well, I mean,
building
we're still at the COVID put us back a little bit, but we want people to participate more than once. We have to find an equal number of conservatives and liberals.
Yeah.
And public radio tends to be more liberal, so there's a lot of
Really?
outreach to you. I know, it's surprising. And so there's a lot of outreach to conservatives, and then we get, people may participate more than once. We do evaluations with them. We ask them about what their experience is. And you were talking, when you were talking before about that experience of looking someone in the eye, it reminded me of, I had a very early One Small Step experience. And I hope we can get you to do one of these.
I'd love to.
Okay.
Yeah.
When we first started One Small Step, I went on the radio looking for the first crop of volunteer participants. And honestly, at the beginning, we were thinking it would be family members too, and later we decided it's not family members because those, you don't really wish your family member dead, So
So you don't need Thanksgiving on any other day than Thanksgiving.
Exactly, you got it.
Yeah.
So I put out a call. I went on the radio and put out a call for our first group of participants, and I was on a plane, as we used to be once upon a time.
Right.
And I got an email from there was a place where you would call in and say you wanted to participate, and someone on my staff, a lot of people called in, and someone on my staff sent me a text that said that was directed to me that called me every name in the book, snowflake, like you're a moron, and just and they were like, can you believe this? And I had my go-go wireless on the plane. And I saw this thing, and I mean, every curse word you can imagine. And I wrote back to the guy immediately, and I was like, I'd like to do a One Small Step interview with you. And he wrote back immediately on the plane, ping, and he was like, I do too, and I want to take you out to dinner. And I know. And I had no idea who this guy was. And I went to Rhode Island 2 weeks later, and I met this guy, and he was just a kid. He was like, I don't even remember sending this. I just drive around in my car, scrolling through the radio, and sending texts to people. And just looking him in the eye,
Right,
you know,
right.
and he, one of the things, it's interesting because this hadn't even occurred to me. He called me the F word. And I told him in the interview, we did an interview, and I was like, my dad was gay. And he just looked at me and he was like, I can't believe I called, he didn't, but just looking each other in the eye, it was like, it's addictive. You know, it's like I knew he was never in his life ever going to do this thing again, not even having the conversation.
Right.
So we're just so, we just have to break the spell. And there's a spell in this country, and it's a virus,
Right.
that's spreading really quickly, and we've
Right.
got to figure out a way to deal with this.
Yeah, it seems important too, and then we'll turn to some questions from the audience, that this be amplified in some way, right? Because there needs to be some way to counter the dominant narrative that we're constantly at each other's throats and that these divides are not bridgeable.
Yeah.
And do you have ideas about how you? I mean, the NPR telling of StoryCorps was a huge amplification.
Yeah.
Will something similar happen here?
Yeah. So we're going to tell the stories in a different way.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to, again, if people see in a society people acting a certain way, you can shift social norms very quickly. So, I mean, it's not a perfect analogy, but at one point, smoking was cool and sexy, and then it wasn't.
Right.
And right now, treating each other horribly is cool and sexy, and we have to make it so that it's not. So we've launched a public health campaign with the Ad Council, and we're going to continue just pushing these stories out, pushing messages out, and showing that this is possible.
Yeah.
That we're, that again, I mean, it's like you said, that when you get down to it, there is so much more we share in common than divides us.
Right.
Not, just speaking of, I think our facilitators are working recording interviews now. But one of the StoryCorps is very much a project that I think speaks, it tells truths that are true about who we are as human beings. And the facilitators, whose job it is to bear witness to these interviews and go on the road for a year or 2 years listening to people's stories, and come back, and if you ask them what they've learned, everyone gives a version of the Anne Frank quote that people are basically good. And there might have been some kind of a selection bias in the first 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, but when you get up to 750,000 people, there's got to be some truth to that.
Yeah.
So, Mother Teresa used to say, we've forgotten that we belong to one another. And, hopefully what this is going to do here in UVA, in Charlottesville, and across the country is remind us that indeed, we do.
Yeah. Well, I could not be happier that we have the opportunity to partner with you. I really believe in what you're doing, and it's been a total pleasure to spend time with you.
I feel the same way.
And
now,
now,
this is only the beginning.
I think Melody has some questions from the audience.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for that conversation. And we're going to take a few questions from the audience. I'm going to start right here with our own Sophie Treywalter.
Thank you so much for the work that you do, and thank you so much for supporting it. As a social psychologist, I have totally seen the power of intergroup contact. I think it's incredibly powerful, and I'm so grateful to you for the work that you do. I was wondering if you could just talk to us a little bit about how you think about the balance between contact and building empathy on the one hand, and collective action and building sort of outrage on the other, because even though those are not mutually exclusive, right, you could have empathy and outrage, you could have collective action and contact. I think some of the data suggests that perhaps contact can at least undermine the perception that we need collective action in some cases. And so as we take this step as a community, how do we think about that balance? How do we both cultivate that empathy, but also really foster collective action that's collective together? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, of course. Thanks, Sophie. I do. And contact theory, the contact hypothesis is the same thing as contact theory, and we've talked before, and I know that you worked with Jen Richardson, who's our researcher at Yale. So I think that the two things go together. That you need to be able that obviously there's an incredibly important role for activism, and there's an important role for listening. And if you don't if you don't have a little bit of both, neither one is going to work. We model our, in many ways, we model how we do One Small Step on marriage equality. And I spent some time on the phone with Evan Wolfson, who ran Marriage Equality, Freedom to Marry. And which was a brilliantly run campaign, and I think that it was both a combination of activism and a combination of love and listening, and one of the most successful political campaigns that we've seen. And I got on the phone with Evan in August, and he said, you have to, first of all, I asked him, he spent 30 years and $200 million, which is a little bit intimidating, to get over the finish line. But I said, the first thing I said to him was, did you always know you were going to win? And it was the fastest answer I've ever gotten to a question. It was immediate. He said yes. He knew from the very beginning that he was going to win. And his advice was, you have to figure out right now, what does winning look like? And we spent the last month, our group, including Jen Richardson, just digging down and figuring out what does winning look like for One Small Step. So I think that you need both of those, and neither can win alone. The nonviolent protest and action is twice as effective as violent protest in making change. So I think that to be truly successful in making change, it has to be done with love. So that's my answer to your question.
Thank you. All right, we'll take another question. Let's see one in the back, yeah. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Stephen Betts. I'm a graduate student here at UVA and also on the One Small Step team here at UVA.
Great.
You've talked about your vision and the importance of having a vision. And I also like that you refer to One Small Step as a moonshot, because when I think one small step, I think one giant leap.
Yes.
Right? And what I'm wondering is, what's the next step? If we have this big vision of creating unity and fostering these kinds of conversations nationally, what's the next step beyond this? Once people start participating in this locally in Charlottesville, where do they go next?
Yeah. So, the next step is getting involved with other groups that are bridge building groups. The next step is not making snap judgments about people based on their politics. The next step is holding back on a tweet that you think you're going to send, but don't send the next time. I mean, it's a little bit of a ripple of hope analogy, the great Bobby Kennedy image of the ripples of hope coming together and rising up and sweeping away injustice. I think it's just kind of ripples of us moving away from that fear and polarization and moving towards openness and love towards other people and recognize. I think that part of the success of One Small Step that we're seeing and that we are going to see is because God help, we believe that everybody's story matters equally and infinitely, like with every cell of our bodies. And if you're BSing someone, they know. So I mean, just going in with that openness that both parties are on equal ground and deserve to be heard, and everybody's got this like light and beauty inside of them, and none of us are the worst things we've ever done, is critical to making this thing work. And hopefully that idea is infused and passed on to the people who participate in One Small Step. And the real answer is we don't know. We're kind of making this up as we go, because this is, we're dealing with a problem that feels intractable, and we're being as flexible as we can as we move forward to see what's most effective for people once they've participated in One Small Step. So the one thing we do know is that we're going to figure it out, and with partners like UVA, we're going to make a difference.
Yeah, and I would just say, one, that I think your answer to this question was tied to your answer to the first question, that there are elements that sit beside one another. When I think of all the work that Jim and his administration has done here at the University of Virginia, I think of the work of our Equity Center, that all of this work complements itself. And we'll, at the end, talk a little bit more about some of the things that we plan to do next, just as you were saying, Dave, in partnership with your team and building off of One Small Step. We'll take a question I see.
I keep looking down at my paper because you have a Professor Hunter here, had like a great quote that answers your question perfectly, but I can't find it in my notes. Which is
Thank you, Dave, for being here,
Yeah,
and thank you, President Ryan. This is a terrific partnership for American democracy, so I'm thrilled to see it come to UVA. So you talked about this is an experiment in human connection. You can see the power of face-to-face eye contact, in-person communication. Yet you also talked about the kid in Rhode Island who took out the anti-conversation device and shouted a whole bunch of terrible things at you without listening at all.
Yeah.
And many of us live now in communities where the people we see are people like us.
Yeah.
What are the limits and possibilities of technology and of this methodology to counter technology and also take advantage of technology so that we can spread this into one giant leap, or at least many small steps that add up to something transformative?
Yeah, I mean, the great paradox of our time is that we live at this moment where all of these, where technology has allowed human connection at a level that was unimaginable, yet we're driving one another farther and farther apart using this technology. So, technology plays a huge role in One Small Step. And, we when the pandemic hit, every single StoryCorps interview we'd done had been done face-to-face. And we knew that, that creating a virtual way to do StoryCorps was going to be important for One Small Step, but we had plotted it for the third year of One Small Step because we thought it would take that long. The pandemic hit, we created a virtual platform in 3 weeks, which is like a great lesson in the fierce, like when you have to do something, you just do it. We said, why did we think it was going to take us 3 years? It took us 3 weeks. And that was used for people who were, for elders, for teachers looking for meaningful classroom experiences remotely, a way to do StoryCorps remotely on a safe platform and with one tap uploaded to the Library of Congress. But we also started testing One Small Step with that technology. And it's actually probably more effective than doing it face-to-face, because when you're a stranger, it's very difficult to coordinate getting together in the same place. And it also takes a fair amount of courage to do this thing, and people are much more comfortable doing this remotely. So technology, that technology has completely ripped the Band-Aid off and made everything possible for One Small Step in terms of our ability to reach everybody across the country. So it's thrilling in that way. But again, we're fighting this this fear, this onslaught of fear that is generated from social media. So it's an interesting balance, and hopefully we'll win. We have to win.
Indeed. I think that is the perfect way to say thank you so much to both of you for this wonderful conversation and for engaging with our audience. Dave Isay and President Jim Ryan.
Jim, I hope I see you again. Yeah, thanks. Anything you ever need. Okay, thank you.
So in the introduction, I mentioned that we had 2 UVA students who are our very, very first One Small Step UVA interviewees, and I am now excited to say that we're going to hear from them, Marquis Rice and Diana Moreno. Marquis is a first-year UVA student who previously spent 8 years in the military. He's interested in pursuing marketing and is from Valdosta, Georgia. He heard about One Small Step through the UVA Student Veterans Association. Diana is a third-year UVA student, born and raised in California, and she moved to Virginia 6 years ago. She's majoring in public policy in the Batten School and very interested in media studies. She's also deeply involved in the One Small Step project recruitment efforts. But before they come to stage, we've got another video. It's a short one featuring the Democracy Initiative Student Advisory Council, and it was filmed well before we started putting One Small Step together. But I think it very, very clearly speaks to the fact that students are extremely interested in having the kinds of conversations that we've been discussing today. Please take a look at the video.
So the Democracy Initiative Student Advisory Council is a group of students who are selected to work with us to understand what undergraduates at UVA would like the Democracy Initiative to do. They do that by meeting, deliberating, creating their own structure, and proposing different sorts of programs that we can pursue to contribute to intellectual and political life on grounds.
Being able to actually have conversations with other people about democracy and it not be an argument, I think that the Democracy Initiative Council strives to make all students like as incorporated as they can.
It just created an environment where we were all able to really look at the entire picture versus just the loudest people in the room.
You can't have democracy with just one side, you know? It's multifaceted.
What we could all learn from one another is to really be more like understand, more compassionate. Like I see where your side is coming from. This is where my side. Where can we meet in the middle? And I think that would prevent a lot of gridlock and a lot of like Congress not being able to do as much.
My opinions aren't necessarily that of the majority of the student body. And I had somebody who I absolutely least expected it reach out to me and he was like, hey, can we jump on a phone call? And he was like, well, you have a different opinion and we all need to hear it. You need to talk more. And I was just kind of shocked. I was like, what do you mean? I know you don't agree with any of my opinions. Like, I've seen your Twitter. And he was like, yeah, no, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff you say, but I do with a lot of other stuff. And that's like a conversation we need to have, especially in this environment.
One of the powerful things the students did this year is they noticed or they identified the fact that there's actually traditionally been very low participation in student elections. They actually went on the steps on the day of student election with a banner that said "Democracy lives here," as a way of essentially asking students that if they're interested in democracy, they maybe should start by participating right at home where they are. And this year's election saw record turnout, almost nearly doubled the number of students who participated, and we like to think that our students had an impact in getting the student body more engaged and more active in that way.
Here at UVA, the school's built off leaders, and so sometimes I think learning how to lead in a democratic way is one of like the key things I feel like people should take away from this university because it's so self-government driven.
In the microcosm that is the Student Advisory Council, what's the most necessary is having a background, and that's not necessarily their political affiliation. It's more like what they've gone through, what their experiences are, because it makes it more unique in the events that we try and host, because we're attending to a population that is better represented now.
Everybody at the end of the day, whether we all want to get there in a different direction, really loves our country and loves our people and wants what's best for us. So I really think that this council has done a great job at kind of tearing that away, sitting down and having real, true conversations with each other.
In general, we need to learn how to speak, but also learn how to listen and be heard in an effective way.
We have a lot more to accomplish, and I think that UVA is well equipped to change the scene of democracy in the next few years, just based on the people that we have here, the students and the faculty.
And now, please, a warm welcome for Diana Marquis, and Bicentennial Professor and Democracy Initiative Director for Academic Affairs, Laurent Dubois.
Well, thank you all so much for being here today, and especially thanks to Marquise and Diana. Dave talked about StoryCorps gathering the wisdom of humanity, and I had the opportunity to listen the other day to your interview, the first interview in our project, and I want to thank you for sharing a lot of the deep things you did and the wisdom that you did in that interview. And so today we're going to get to hear a little more from you and talk about that process. The first question is a simple one, which is just, can you talk about why you agreed to be part of this project, not just part of this project, but the first into this experiment?
I could go first. I actually wanted to make an intentional act to have a conversation with someone I knew that I disagreed with, and I think this was an important decision, and I'm glad I met Marquise. So it's been a great experience.
And I'm happy that I met Diana as well. So I wanted to participate in the One Small Step initiative because I believed in its mission to connect with people across political lines through their shared humanity with this first step. And getting dialogue started. One Small Step provided a very inviting space to foster those necessary conversations. And the new perspectives are shared, respected and heard. And plus, I wanted to step out of my comfort zone and really get to know someone on a more deeper level than just the surface.
Mm-hmm. Were there parts of the conversation that were difficult, hard to kind of get at? Or?
Yeah, I think the first few moments, as you could tell in the interview, were a little difficult because I didn't know what the boundaries were. I didn't want to disrespect him, but I didn't want to push him and, see his ideals, and yeah, just balancing that line was kind of hard.
Yeah.
But we got it. Yeah.
Yep, we definitely got it done. I just want to say communicating effectively, no doubt, was definitely the hardest part of the experience. Living in the world of cancel culture, our opinions and our thoughts can definitely be taken out of context. And that is one of those obstacles we really have to face when going through life right now. But don't cancel me, y'all. Don't cancel me.
It felt like in the interview, a kind of moment where you really started to connect was around your shared experience as first-generation students at UVA. But at the same time, there was really interesting differences in how you thought about kind of your that experience and your relationship to your communities. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what you learned, in that part of that conversation.
Yeah, I feel like that's where the conversation kind of changed, and that we both know the struggle of being first gen, and we do have support systems, but it's definitely different in our families, and he talked about that more, but we share the same experience. I think that was very cool, that we did have different experiences, but we got to know each other more, and we saw where we were coming from.
Right. I saw how her family was adaptable, and then me coming from the military, we have to adapt to new environments all the time as well, and we really connected over the difference between what was privilege and what is not privilege. Her family came from El Salvador, which was amazing, and they came over here with just the ideas of the American dreams, that you can literally make your future whatever you make it, through hard work and dedication, and her family really shows that.
Both of you, interestingly, had this connection to the sort of history of refugees, right? Your parents had fled war to the U.S., and you've been working to support the Afghan refugees who are leaving, a country where you also served in the military. I wonder if you can just reflect on how that's shaped some of your values or perspectives.
Yes. So it really has shaped my values in the sense that the Afghans and us, even though we were on two separate parts of the world, we had a lot of similarities. We all were fighting for a cause that we truly believed in, and we all had things that we needed to get done. Not only, even though after we just finished serving from the military, that the service didn't stop there. We continued to raise money for the Afghan refugees, and I'm gonna shout out an awesome young lady, Ashley Vargas, who headed that up, which is in our Student Veterans of America. We've raised $6,000 already, and I'm super grateful for that, to be able to continue to serve, even though I'm no longer, wearing the uniform.
And yeah, as you said, my parents fled El Salvador because of war and poverty, and now they're U.S. citizens, and they have been for like 30 years, but they very much told me, as you said, the American dream, and that I could work to anything I could put my mind on, and yeah, I'm great to be here. I'm very grateful to be here.
You both, I think, talked about your interest in individual freedom and kind of cultivating freedom, and at the same time, I came through that you both have a sense of kind of duty and responsibility to your communities or to other people. And I just wonder if you could reflect a little bit on how does one balance those two values, or how do you balance those in your own lives?
Well, for me personally, my parents, going back to that comment, my parents have always told me to follow my dreams. And I feel like that's very important to myself and to people around me, that I'm happy with myself. And that connects back to your question, is that I love to give back, and they've always taught me, if you do become successful, you always have to help people along the way. And I do that as a student now, and I will continue to do so.
Very nice. The way I think about freedom is, again, once I was in the military and I'm seeing the struggles and the trials and tribulations that we all have faced, and we really are fighting for our constitutions, the freedom for everyone to say what they want, be who they want, and do what they want, as long as they don't hurt anyone else in the process. And I truly appreciate that aspects that I got to fight for. So we literally are fighting with the One Small Step initiative. Is literally a test to the freedoms we have in America, because again, if we were doing this in any other country, well, more on the Middle Eastern side, we wouldn't have the opportunity to speak our mind and to be free and to say what we want without persecution.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I know you at one moment you said for you freedom summed up by your mother's saying, "Mind your own business," which I and and I think both it came through very powerfully that both cases I think your families and your mothers really kind of gave you values and that you follow.
Agreed. Again, like you said, my mother says mind my own business, and I do very much that. Whatever someone does behind their doors is completely on them, and I shouldn't, as long as I know it's not legal or morally wrong, try to press upon or change their ideas. We can always expand thoughts, but at the end of the day, mind your own business.
Very much true, very much true. And respect each other and, consider different perspectives. And, like, again, in this conversation, like, we respect each other, and that's how we made it work. And be open-minded.
Very much so.
Yeah, and it sounds like maybe I already know the answer to this question, but you guys, is this the beginning of maybe more conversations and maybe walking together a bit further in this conversation?
Definitely so. We just came back off break. We were trying to get up with each other before the event even started, just to check in on each other and to see how we are doing mentally about the situation. But definitely in the future, hopefully we can not only expand our networks, but maybe possibly get dinner and continue this conversation further, because it's very nice to be able to get past the social taboos of talking about politics and what and get to what truly matters when it comes down to someone.
And adding on to that, we're not just our political beliefs. Like, we're so much more than that. We have different experiences, even though, yes, we have very different experiences, but we can find things that we agree on, and we're humans at the end of the day, and we love to do certain things, and it's much more than politics.
Agreed. As the video said, we're multifaceted.
Are there things that you learned from this process that you might also use with other conversations or other relationships? I know you're working with the veterans on campus. You're working with different groups. Are there tactics here that you could use in those contexts?
Definitely so. This at the beginning of the conversation, like she said before, it was really rocky to get started. But once we got going with those very very personable and interesting questions, the conversation just started flowing, and it really gave a sense of direction of where we wanted to take the conversation. And I can definitely use that at SVA, Student Veterans of America, whenever we have those difficult conversations on what needs to be done, what is important and what's not important.
And likewise, as I'm getting older and next year, maybe fourth year, and being on these different boards, definitely foster an environment where I could let different students talk to each other and really listen to each other, and I think that's really important.
And do you think this can have a bigger impact on the campus among the student groups? You sense that this is something a lot of students are looking for? Or?
I definitely agree with that 100%. As you guys were speaking up here, the founder was speaking up here and said that he's hoping to get this on other campuses. I truly believe that, here I go back to my military days. Literally, before the draft, we had such a sense of community. We had before, I believe, World War I, we had such a pride for the American experience. And after the draft became optional, as time goes on and education seeps in, we all seem to separate. We all seem to create a divide. And I believe having these conversations with those different perspectives shows that we're not all just those 1 to 2 minor things that makes us different, but we all are more alike in many ways, and therefore create more of a unified nation.
And working together will always be more effective, especially here at UVA. If we get different people from different places, we'll make more effective decisions and be more careful about what we say, and ultimately make a better impact.
So how would you encourage, first of all, and if you were going to encourage them, how would you encourage other people to participate in this? What would you share with them from your experience?
I would share with them, I would share with them that this is not one of those conversations that you can stray back from. Once you get started, you're not going to want to stop. I know we didn't, but again, the time was only an hour and 15 minutes, and we wanted to continue to keep going. Hopefully, I've made a very good acquaintance, and we can continue to move forward. And for someone who's looking for a sense of community, this is definitely a good way to start, because I'm still looking for my community as I'm a first year, and I'm happy to add her to it.
Yeah. And I would definitely encourage people to be curious, ask questions. I was very curious in a military experience, because I don't have any experience in that. So be curious, and yeah, and just be open-minded. Be open-minded. You'll never know what you expect out of people, and that's the beauty of it.
Agreed. Like they said before, everyone has a story, and once you actually, get past those surface conversation, that story can definitely move everyone forward.
Well, thank you both so much. We're really so lucky to have you start this project. We hope you'll keep being involved, and we appreciate you speaking with us today as well. So thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
Well, thank you again, Marquise and Diana and Laurent. That was really wonderful. And I hope it encouraged you all to consider signing up, because we have big goals for the UVA One Small Step project. We want to do 250 conversations, and since they're conversations, that means 500 people. I think we already have over 160 signed up, which is fantastic. But are any of the people who signed up in this room, can I just see a show of hands for those? Fantastic, wonderful. So that's great, thank you. And for those of you that didn't raise your hand, here's your chance. There is a QR code on your program and also your bookmark. That's a way that you can sign up. Also, please feel free to touch base with one of our staff members. They will help you and point you in the right direction. The other thing we would ask you to do is talk to your friends and family, your neighbors, the people you are in worship with, the people that you see at the soccer game or football, Little League football, whatever you're attending right now, whatever sports season we're in. Please encourage people to sign up. The other thing that we're doing is that we're looking for community partners. We already have some terrific partners, people across the ideological spectrum, and we need more, because we are hoping that they will encourage their constituencies, their audiences, to sign up for this as well. We are determined, because we know that it's important to have students and community members and faculty and staff and in conversation with one another, but to do that, we need to have those numbers. So please, please, please sign up. Also know that your interviews will be part of history. As we've discussed, they'll be archived in the Library of Congress, which I personally think is a pretty cool thing to have happen. And as we mentioned before, there is work that will follow on. One Small Step is a wonderful partner, and as you know, they are doing this work across the country. We're their first university partner. Because we are a university, not only do people have really, really, really long titles here, but, but we do research. And Dr. Sophie Treywalter, who you heard from before, is going to be doing some follow-on research looking at the benefit and the longevity and the impact of these kinds of conversations. So we'll learn more about them as we continue over the course of this year. So in concluding, first of all, I want to thank the StoryCorps One Small Step team. You all have been just wonderful to work with. Thank you so much. We look forward to more of that. I also, again, want to thank Katie and Jim for letting us hang out in their backyard. Not everybody will let this happen in their backyard, so thank you so much for that. Also, our Equity Center colleagues and the Democracy Initiative team, just wonderful. They are scattered throughout, but I certainly want to thank our project manager, Samyuktha Mahadevan. Thank you. Sarah Ross, who's our events manager. Ellen Oakes, our chief of staff, and so many of our colleagues who have come today. I see Jessica, I saw Jennifer, I saw others, so thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and Laurent for also being such a wonderful, wonderful partner. Again, thank you for being here. Please, please, please sign up, and we look forward to working with you to take one small step. Thank you.